Welcome to Book Solve, and the first video that I'm making as I read the first 48 pages of this book, Ultramarine, which was written by Mariette Navarro in French and was translated by Cory Stockwell into English in 2023. Let me read the epigram at the start here. There are the living, the dead, and the sailors. They already know intimately to which category they belong. There are no real surprises, no real revelations. Wherever they happen to be, they know whether or not they're in the right place. There are the living, who are busy building, and the dead, calm in the depths of their tombs. And then there are the sailors. So the first thing I sort of pick up from this is that it's probably about different kinds of people taking on life in a different way. Some people just letting it pass by, and some people interacting with it quite sharply. The book starts with an inciting incident, and that inciting incident is a woman. As yet, we haven't got a name for her, saying, "All right," and it's a third-person narrative, and it's clear that she's concerned about the fact that she's said these words, and she hadn't decided that that's what she was going to say. And she's in a position where she's expected to make certain decisions, not to prevaricate. It says she doesn't know if weakness preceded her decision, or if everything happened all at once, when at the end of the meal she said, "All right." At the moment, we don't know anything about that meal. She starts to think about whether she's... I've got some notes. I always take notes when I'm reading. It's whether she made that, whether there's something inside her that actually preceded whether the thought of her mind, what she said precedes the mind, her thinking about it, and whether there was something inside her that she didn't know about that made her say that. And she talks about how she's a serious person who likes stability. But we find out that actually she's a sea captain, and she's gone out to sea. She set sail on adventures, taking risks. And my immediate thought was, oh, perhaps this is an allegory, that the ship and the crew who she's under are going to be representing her body, and how that works, and it's going to perhaps pose the questions of how much are we in control of ourselves, and how much do we understand of ourselves. We find out that she's the daughter of the ship's captain when she was growing up. So, is she following in her father's footsteps? I think so. And then she talks about men, and how they can be condescending and contemptuous. She's had to struggle to get to the position she's in, a male role in society as a captain, and it's been hard work for her to gain the respect that she's got. Um, let's see now. I use these little highlighter translucent stickers. That's it. And then she talks about. Right, yeah. So one of the things I always look for in writing in books that I like are sentences that really are beautiful. And here's one here. Um, yeah, so it says, she accepts every job, picks up cargo wherever it may be, takes over inventory, makes up for lost time. For a while now, she has felt as though she's sailing on velvet, as though her navigation had attained the fluidity of a perfectly executed dance. I really like that. Yeah, it's a nice image of what she's doing at the moment. Um, she's it says she's learned to have an answer for everything, a voice adapted to every situation, and a mask for every annoyance. So she's made this shield maybe around herself. She doesn't shake hands with anyone. She touches nothing but metal or the fabric of her own clothing when she crosses her arm over her chest. So she hasn't done much interacting with the men in her crew. Anyway, um, and after 4 days at sea, it says the chief mate, during a meal, leans toward her and, with a candour she's never seen in him, asks, "Could we, serious question, cut the engines, lower the lifeboats, and treat ourselves to a little swim?" This is clearly a really strange thing to ask. They're delivering cargo, as we were saying. They keep referring to the boat as a freighter, and it's to this that she answers, "All right." And then we go on to the second chapter, where instead of talking about she, it starts talking about they and talking about the the sailors as they take on this task of cutting the engines, lowering the lifeboats, and treating themselves to a little swim in the ocean. The interesting thing here is that as soon as they cut the engines off and everything goes quiet, and the boats they've sailed to the Azores, so it's in the calm, and the boat's not rocking and all the rest of it. And the sailors are quite excited about going for a swim in the ocean, but they all feel sick. It's not seasick from no motion rather than motion. And when the engine stops, the men lose the balance they had found, and the learning comes undone. And they become mad dogs, banging into each other, puking their guts out. All the same, they feel something like euphoria for having arrived at this point. And we get the feeling that something terrible, I think, is going to happen when they all take to the lifeboat and go for this swim in the sea. And there's a lot in the book here about the how forbidding the ocean is, and how they've how they've gone from creatures of the earth into creatures of an entirely new environment in the ocean, in the water, and it's so cold, and they've got themselves naked, and we think there's something terrible going to happen here. Um, it talks about as though it's a rebirth. This birth on the perfect curvature of the horizon is far more successful than the first one that took place 20, 30, 40 years ago within the walls of a hospital somewhere in Europe. Now they are born adults of their own free will, feet first, arms alongside their bodies, and in their throats the first heard hint of a song, of a cry beginning to form. Um, and we learn quite a bit then about their experiences in the water, where they seem to get individualized, that they start to lose their awareness of each other, and to move at first with confidence, and then decreasing confidence in the water. Their faces are ecstatic, abandoned, their bodies arched with pleasure, and each one knows that it is only in his own language that the sea becomes the sea, that the ocean gains its power. And as they swim for 10 minutes and then up to a half hour, it starts to be, you start to suspect that maybe they're going to have a problem getting back on board the freighter via the lifeboat, and then by the ladders that are sent down the side of the boat for them to go. They start to feel the cold, and they feel a sense of vertigo because of the depth of the ocean below them. And yet we have a little thing again about masculinity, and a little poke at it again here, where they have no problem keeping themselves above water. They're not yet worried. They're the kind of men who know their bodies, who train, who work out, who are attentive to the slightest of weaknesses. They cannot be intimidated. They're the kind of men who can be made to feel vulnerable by a second of absence. They're not the kind of men, rather than the kind of man. But I think it's sort of saying that, but then we find that actually they're very vulnerable and very self-aware, that they're aware that they're at quite a bit of risk here. They don't know how fast and where the other swimmers are at a particular time. They start getting confused, and they become dizzy. And as time goes by, 20 minutes up to 30 minutes, at the half-hour mark, they encounter a time that stops. Their hearts in their throats, their cries, crushing laughter from within. They have a clear sensation of their disappearance and their ignorance. And we go on further to... so it's interesting. You don't know what's going to happen here now. The next chapter goes back to the sea captain, and how she's the only one left on board, and she looks over at the sailors through the binoculars at them swimming in the ocean, but because they're all naked, you can't tell which one's which. And she goes into one of the cabins and has a poke about in the cabin, looking at the clothes, and the pebble that the ship's mate has got in his pocket, and then she has a shower, um, and she there's a lot here that's about smell. Just before this bit, there is first of all this change in how the smell of her skin, the smell of her hands. This is when she's contemplating what changes have happened to her. The smell of her skin, the smell of her hands, a mixture of grease and metal, a sort of ointment. It's a matter of chemistry as much as mechanics. So she gives herself over to this stinking life, to fuel, to the black blood of the beast that carries her on her back, this beast at once dead and alive, spitting like a human when she accelerates, wailing as she clears her bronchial tubes. So the ship is actually becoming personified in that position, and we find this sea captain, she's far more at home at sea than she is about the port. She talks about the port being a really scary place that could really hurt her. She remembers as well of a former lover that she had, and how she found out more about him by smelling his sweater and putting it on, and looking at the newspapers and the books that he was reading, and listening to the sounds that happened around where he lived, and the voices of his neighbours. And she thought that was more revealing than what he actually told her. And she suddenly starts to have this fantasy of maybe she could just sail the ship away herself. She knows how to do all the jobs on there, and she has this fantasy that she could just leave all these sailors abandoned in the ocean and go off in the ship. And that's where we've got to on here. I guess, well, is that going to happen? I don't know. But I'm really taken by the story. It is fascinating. And yeah, so we'll see where it goes from there. I don't think we're ever going to find out her name. I think really it's something about how she's going to change with this particular experience. But we shall see when I read the next bit. Okay, so that's the first of those, and a happy reading to you all, and we'll see you next time on Booksolve for the next few pages, and I shall try to make the video a little bit shorter. Yeah, it's a bit long, isn't it?